You don't fall to your goals, you rise to your identity. So let's talk about how you can upgrade it on demand with an alter ego. Grab your cup of tea and let's dive into it. I have a new favorite book and I am absolutely obsessed. It is Todd Herman's book, The Alter Ego Effect, which I actually read as an audiobook, and I've only just started to integrate audiobooks into my life in the last few weeks, and I absolutely loved listening to this as an audiobook as well. And I'm still reading all of my physical books, which if you follow this channel, you know I do a lot of reading. But reading audiobooks has added a whole other dimension to my reading experience, and I really loved reading this book in particular as an audiobook. So in this episode, I am going to be breaking down my top 10 takeaways from this book, and there are so many more than that. These are just my favorites that I am going to share with you today. In the book, The Alter Ego Effect, Todd Herman highlights how elite performers, so anyone from CEOs to singers to elite athletes to high performers in any industry, use this idea of an alter ego or a second self to step into their highest performing self, especially in high pressure situations where results matter the most. And what I find really fascinating about creating an alter ego is that it's not actually about creating this fake persona of yourself. It is about accessing traits that you already have within you and strategically coming up with a way that you can step into that more heroic version of yourself. So in the alter ego effect, Todd Herman says, the process of using an alter ego is not about changing one's fundamental self, but rather about revealing the heroic qualities that are already present within. So again, this comes back to the idea that your alter ego is not a fake persona. It is not just a performance. It is this second self. And Merriam-Webster's definition of an alter ego also reflects this. It describes an alter ego as a second self or a different version of oneself, such as a trusted friend or the opposite side of a personality. Now, I've shared another episode about creating an alter ego before, but this episode is going to go into a lot more detail. But part of that discussion in that earlier episode, if you do want to check it out, also included the ancient art of yin and yang, or the ancient philosophy of yin and yang, and why these opposite sides of your personality are important and how they actually complement each other, that you actually need dark and light, for example, or any sort of opposing characteristics. But you don't need to watch that episode to get the takeaways that I'm going to share with you today. I also love that the alter ego effect says, I would encourage you to consider your alter ego not as a mask you put on, but as a mask you take off to move closer to your true self. It also says your alter ego gives you permission to be bold. There are a lot of examples that Todd Herman shares from his client base in the book. A lot of them are sports people or they are performers, for example. But there was one example that I absolutely loved that I think is so iconic, and that was the alter ego of Marilyn Monroe, who was also called Norma Jean. And he describes this occasion in the 1950s where Norma Jean, or Marilyn Monroe, was being followed around by a photographer in New York City. And when she was in her Norma Jean persona, so she was dressed like her, she was moving like her, no one actually noticed who she was. And then she would say to the photographer, "Do you want to see her?" And just by removing her camel coat that she was wearing, by fluffing up her hair, by a shift in her energy and a change in her posture, she immediately became the Marilyn Monroe persona that everyone was so familiar with, this iconic persona. And people started to recognize her. They started to notice her. as she would shift into that personality. And then she would say, do you want to see her? And she would shift into Norma Jean. It was that easy for her to step into her persona with a couple of simple changes. And that is also what we are going to get into today in today's episode. So we'll talk about how you can develop your persona and how you can also step into it as well. Let's start with my takeaway number one, which is the science behind why being yourself is limiting. And I know that this can be a controversial opinion when so many people in personal branding or when talking about personal branding always love to discuss authenticity. But the problem with authenticity is that it can keep you in this fixed mindset as opposed to a growth mindset. And your performance isn't actually based on your goals. It is most often a result of who you think you are. So for example, if you see yourself as a shy person, then you are going to act shy. If you see yourself as a powerful person, then you are going to act powerfully. Again, you don't rise to your goals, you fall to your identity. And what an alter ego does is that it allows you to create a self-concept that upgrades that identity. So there was a well-known study that I have shared on this channel before, and that was a study that explored 3 groups of children and their performance and this idea of an alter ego effect. And in that study, it showed that the children who performed the worst were the children who were referring to themselves in the first person. The group that performed better were the children that were referring to themselves in the third person. But the group that performed the best were the children that were referring to themselves as a character that they identified with, like Batman, for example. This is where the Batman effect that you might have heard of comes from. This allowed the children to step into those characteristics of their favorite character to overcome those obstacles as a part of their performance. So if you are feeling a little bit stuck, remember that this can sometimes be driven by the internal forces within. So you want to make sure that you are addressing that before you even try and step into your transformation. I've done another episode recently about why you might be feeling stuck, why you might be failing. So if you haven't already, then make sure you check out that episode as well. My takeaway number 2 was the idea of showing up on your field of play. Now, we don't have just one identity. We have different identities that are related to different contexts and different roles that we play in our life. And what high performers do really well is that they consciously understand their identities in different scenarios. They understand what their field of play is, and they show up on that field of play. So your field of play, for example, might be the boardroom. It could be showing up to create content. Maybe it is public speaking or being on stage, or it could be playing a sport, for example. So what environment does your performance matter in? Because identifying your field of play really clearly helps you to change the game. In the book, The Alter Ego Effect, Todd Herman says, when plagued by imposter syndrome, people don't take themselves, their abilities, or their accomplishments seriously. If you don't take yourself seriously on any field of play, you most likely won't be getting the results you want. My takeaway number 3 is to name your alter ego. So it is not just enough to understand your alter ego or to create the persona of your alter ego. You have to give your alter ego a name, because naming your alter ego is going to give it psychological weight, but also really importantly, it creates psychological distancing. So if you go back to that children's study and the Batman effect, they were engaging in psychological distancing. And psychological distancing is this idea that you can create mental space between you and what you're experiencing. So you're able to respond with more calm and clarity instead of reacting emotionally. So it creates this distance between fear, doubt, and insecurity. And there are some really famous examples of the top performers in their fields using the concept of an alter ego. One that you may have heard of is Beyonce's Sasha Fierce alter ego. Creating her Sasha Fierce alter ego allowed her, especially in the earlier stages of her career, to step away from some of her conservative identity that she had growing up and into this more fierce performance personality that she had developed. And she can also seem sometimes quite reserved when you see her not performing, like in interviews, for example. So you can see how she does actually use this concept of an alter ego to step into that performance personality. And another really famous example is Kobe Bryant and his use of his Black Mamba personality, his alter ego. And he developed this alter ego based on the deadly snake that is known for its speed and its accuracy. Now, if you are trying to name your alter ego, the book goes into a lot of really useful frameworks about how you can go about naming your alter ego, so different formulas that you can use. And just to simplify this might be things like using your name and a trait. So you might say Rebecca, Queen of the Boardroom, for example. Or you might say your name and a title, so something like Michael the CEO. Or it could be some sort of character fusion. So you might say head of sales Bond, and this is related to James Bond, for example, and taking on those characteristics. There are a lot of ways that you can approach how you name your alter ego. This could even be a spirit animal, for example, similar to what Kobe Bryant did. This could be something like a mentor that you really admire, or maybe a loved one that you look up to. It could be a celebrity, it could be a personality of someone that you know, like a friend whose energy you just really resonate with, or this could just be an entirely made up name. But you don't want to rush this process. You really want to make sure that you spend time getting this right. You need to come up with something that emotionally resonates with you, because that is what is going to create that psychological weight that is so important to making your alter ego actually effective for your performance. So don't rush the process. When you find what your alter ego name is, you will know. That is what Todd Herman describes in the book. You'll just know when you think of it, it will have that psychological weight, and you can see everything so much more clearer when you hear what that name is for your alter ego. My takeaway number 4 from your alter ego effect is to know your origin story. Every hero story has an origin story, and it's really important that you understand yours, because this relates back to your why. It's why you are motivated as your alter ego to achieve whatever it is that you are trying to achieve. Your origin story is what describes, for example, your pain points, your past experiences, your turning points, all those moments where you might have felt small, overlooked, rejected, or underestimated. Your origin story is what is going to propel your performance in your alter ego. And from memory, you don't actually need to share your origin story with anyone. This is about knowing your origin story for yourself. But if, for example, you want to craft your origin story so that it is really clear to you, I've actually done a couple of episodes about storytelling formulas, because there are some really nice storytelling structures that will help you to create that picture of your hero's journey as well. They are really simple formulas which can help you to understand your place in that hero's journey. So if you love the idea of creating more detail in your storytelling, then make sure you check out those episodes as well. My takeaway number 5 from the alter ego effect is to name your enemy. Now, every hero story also needs a villain, because the villain is what helps the hero to shine in a story. They actually play a really important role. And in the context of creating your alter ego, this is about giving a name to the internal voice, or the doubt, or the fear, for example, the things that could be holding you back. And I can't remember if Todd Herman talks about it this way in the alter ego effect, but I also feel like you could name your enemy something that relates to your origin story, whether that is a person, whether that is a brand, whether that is a scenario, I don't know. But giving a name to your enemy is what is going to help personify this. Again, you're adding emotional intensity to your alter ego process. But again, this could also relate to internal identities that are holding you back. So, for example, the imposter or the procrastinator. What you don't name has control over you. When you name something, you can battle it. It's almost like if you are a hero with a secret weapon, then you need something for that secret weapon to be able to aim at. My takeaway number 6 for creating your alter ego is the use of totems and artifacts. Now, remember, Batman had his Batman suit, and even the author Todd Herman describes how he used glasses as one of his really important artifacts or totems. I can't remember which one it was for him, but it allowed him to step into his alter ego personality. It is why glasses are featured on the cover of the book. Your totems or your artifacts are a physical object that helps you to anchor in to your alter ego, so anchor into your identity. They play a really important role in the alter ego process because they are symbolic, they are a trigger, and they are a reminder of who you are choosing to be. So instead of merely relying on your thoughts to trigger your alter ego, you have something physical that allows you to step into that alter ego. And when it comes to your totems, for example, this plays a more symbolic role in the process. But examples of a totem, if it is meaningful to you, might be something like a ring, a necklace, a watch, or glasses, for example, whatever it is that has meaning for you. So these are the things that have more of that psychological weight. But your artifacts are going to be something that serve as more of a functional trigger. So this might be, for example, a lipstick. It could be putting on a certain pair of shoes or heels. It could be putting on your favorite belt. It could be opening up the notebook that you use when you go to certain meetings. It could be things like your laptop. It could be the blazer that you wear on really high pressure occasions. Or if you play sport, for example, it might be something like your wristband. They are the action orientated physical objects that allow you to step into your moments of impact, which is something that I am also going to get to in a minute as well. But before I do, my takeaway number 7 is activation events. So Superman, for example, had his photo booth transformation moments. These are the moments where you step into that identity, where your identity shifts. This is where you interrupt your default settings for your identity to step into your alter ego. So similar to Marilyn Monroe, these are the shifts that allow you to step into that persona. So this could be, for example, buttoning your blazer. This could be applying your lipstick. This could be putting on your shoes, putting on your belt. Or these could be things that are more verbal, like saying, let's go and insert your alter ego name. Or these could also be environmental. Things like turning on the lights in your studio or switching on your camera, playing a certain song or setting up your desk in a certain way. What is the activation event that happens during your moments of impact? Which leads me to my takeaway number 8, which is your moments of impact. These are your make and break moments. So this, for example, is walking into the boardroom. It is stepping onto the stage. It's your first few moments of filming. It's when you step onto the court. So these are the high impact moments. You don't have to focus on trying to change your whole life. You just have to focus on those high impact moments that matter. My takeaway number 9 from the alter ego effect is essentially to create this main character energy. So it is not enough to simply name your alter ego. It's not enough to just have your totems and your artifacts and understand your field of play and those moments of impact. You have to make sure that you understand the character that you are stepping into. So like the Batman effect with the children, they understood the character of Batman. They understood the characteristics that they wanted wanted to adopt as a part of their performance. So, what are the character traits that you want your alter ego to have? How do they think? How do they speak? How do they dress? How do they handle themselves in high pressure situations? And what you can do when you are trying to think of these traits is to go back to where your inspiration came from for naming your alter ego, for example, or consider your favorite characters. So these might be characters from your favorite movies, your favorite TV shows, your favorite books. These could be actual characters like celebrities or people in different industries that you look up to. What are the characteristics that your alter ego is based around? What is it that you want your alter ego to embody, to personify? And what I actually found when I did this for myself was that I actually fell back to a lot of the characters that I had watched in TV shows when I was much younger. And what surprised me the most about this process was that some of the characters were actually the characters that I didn't actually like in those shows. I actually quite disliked, but I realized that there were elements of their personality or elements of their persona that I did like, which I guess that is what the alter ego is about. It's about unlocking those different elements of yourself and the other side of your personality. So that I found really surprising through this process. So I'd be interested to know how you go with the characters that you come up with for your alter ego and where that inspiration comes from. And something that I would also personally recommend, because I always love to talk about Pinterest on this channel, as you would know if you follow this channel, is to create a board on Pinterest related to these characters. So collect images based on these personas. And I've also seen people add images like this related to the characters that they are aspiring to be to their vision board. So that could also be something that you can do, and something I also talk about on this channel a lot. So if you would like more ideas on using Pinterest to rewire your brain or to create vision boards, then make sure you check out those episodes as well. And my takeaway number 10 is the idea of quests and putting your alter ego into action. Now, what I really found so refreshing about the alter ego effect was that, as dramatic and iconic as some of these stories were that Todd Herman was sharing in his book, when it came to actually putting your alter ego into action for, say, the everyday person, what I really loved was that he made this just so practical and such an easy step to take to start to build this muscle of your alter ego. So he, for example, talks about going on these quests. So it can be as simple as, for example, going to a coffee shop as your alter ego. So for example, before you walk into the coffee shop, taking on that alter ego personality and ordering a coffee at your coffee shop and either staying there as your alter ego or just leaving and having that experience. Or something as simple as going on a walk as your alter ego's persona. So you start to build that muscle, you start to build that exposure to your alter ego so that you start to feel more confident and more comfortable with them. And that your success isn't going to be about your level of motivation, it's going to be about your repetition. Now, if you love all things alter ego, you might also love my series on the art of reinvention. Thanks so much, and I'll see you in the next episode.